The Grease Salon's triage bay was a scene of glaring light and frantic activity. Sleek alien medbots moved silently between hovering stretchers while holographic displays flickered with alien symbols over twitching patients. The air was filled with a sharp scent of ozone and antiseptic. Dr. Ryland Foster, the only human physician on the remote Alliance outpost, pushed through the chaos, his worn medical bag swinging by his side. "What happened?" he called, his voice rising above the mechanical hum. An Andran nurse turned her gaze toward him. "Critical incident. Starship collision during landing. Tension rupture in multiple biological systems. One patient, terminal." Ryland's stomach clenched. Terminal was a word he despised. The nurse gestured to a bed, surrounded by towering figures of Grease Salon medics. Ryland jogged over, his heavy boots clanging against the metal floor. As he neared, he spotted the patient, an unconscious Traxian, a species with a physiology as complex as a Baroque painting and just as fragile. Its translucent skin shimmered faintly, revealing a lattice of internal organs pulsing like organic clockwork. "Too far gone," declared the lead Grease Salon medic, his voice carrying the cold detachment of one who had seen too much death. "Ventral arterial rupture, vascular system collapsed. Loss at 72% and rising. No intervention will stabilize." Ryland stopped short, staring at the Traxian. Its blood, thicker and darker than human blood, pooled beneath the gurney. The vital signs flickered weakly on the hologram. A voice inside him whispered, "No one survives this." The medic waved his segmented fingers at his assistant. They stepped back, retracting their three-fingered hands into their smooth carapaces. "No," Ryland said firmly. The medic's bulbous eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I said no." "You haven't tried everything," Ryland shot back. The medic's antenna quivered, a sign of skepticism. "There's nothing to try, human. The Traxian vascular system is beyond repair." Ryland dropped his bag onto the floor with a decisive thud. "Not by your standards." He gestured to the medbots. "Clear this area. Now." The medic's antenna twitched, but he didn't protest. Ryland didn't wait for permission. He had learned long ago that hesitation was the enemy. "Prep this room for a transfusion," he commanded. "I need plasma-grade synthetic fluid, 20 liters, and a stabilizer for their vascular pressure." The Grease Salon medics hesitated, then reluctantly complied. Ryland snapped on a pair of surgical gloves, the warmth of the room making his forehead bead with sweat as he assessed the damage. The Traxian's main arterial shunt, a flexible tube running the length of its spine, had ruptured, leaving a gaping wound oozing precious fluid. "This is madness," the medic muttered, but he signaled his team to provide the requested materials. "It's a challenge," Ryland muttered to himself. He had once saved a man crushed under a landslide, and kept a child alive through an emergency lung transplant in a moving truck. This was different, alien, but still alive. Life deserved a chance. With the synthetic fluid and tools in hand, Ryland got to work. He carefully inserted a vascular scaffold into the wound, maneuvering it around the delicate mesh of the Traxian circulatory system. The scaffold inflated, temporarily replacing the damaged arteries. It was like stitching into an intricate tapestry with trembling hands. "This won't work," the medic observed flatly, arms crossed. "It's already working," Ryland countered, his tone clipped. He nodded at the monitor, where the patient's vitals showed a slight improvement. "Unlikely," the medic said. "The Traxian immune system will reject the scaffold within minutes." "Not if I beat it to the punch." Ryland was already infusing the patient with an anti-rejection compound he had concocted from human and alien medications. Minutes turned into an hour. The room fell silent, save for the steady beeps of the monitors. The scaffold held. Ryland's hands moved with surgical precision, repairing secondary tears, reconnecting arteries, and sealing smaller leaks with a polymer gel. His movements were powered by sheer will, and the faint hope that this creature would wake up and breathe again. Finally, Ryland stepped back, his gloves dripping with alien blood. The patient's vitals had stabilized, barely. He exhaled deeply, pulling his mask down. "You're insane," the medic said, his tone filled with something close to awe. "No," Ryland replied, slumping against the nearest console. "I'm a doctor." The Traxian remained unconscious, but its breathing was steady. Ryland stared at the monitors, willing them to keep improving. The fight wasn't over. Recovery was a long shot, but for now, he had defied the odds. Keep monitoring him, he told the medic. If anything changes, you call me immediately. The medic's mandibles clicked, a sign of reluctant agreement. I will. As Ryland stumbled out of the room, exhaustion hit him like a freight train. He had just performed a miracle, and though the Grease Salon medics would never admit it, he had bought the Traxian a chance. For Ryland, that was enough, for now. The hum of the triage bay faded behind him as he walked toward his cramped quarters, every muscle aching from the tension, his mind replaying the operation over and over. The Traxian's fragile system had been a puzzle he hadn't fully solved, just patched up for now. But patches didn't last forever. Before he could reach his room, the medic's voice buzzed over the intercom. Human, report back to the triage bay immediately. Ryland groaned, leaning heavily against the wall. What now? He dragged himself back the way he had come, fatigue clinging to him like a second skin. When he entered the bay, the sight that greeted him made his heart lurch. The Traxian's vitals were spiking erratically. The holograms above the bed flashed red warnings in both Grease Salon and common languages. The medic stood at the head of the gurney, his antenna rigid with tension. The neurobiofeedback loop is destabilizing, the medic said sharply. I warned you this would happen. Ryland pushed past him. What's causing it? The medic gestured to the readouts. The immune system is rejecting your scaffold. It is overwhelming the neurological relay, disrupting core organ function. Their body is collapsing. Ryland gritted his teeth. He had known the anti-rejection serum was a gamble, but he had hoped it would buy more time. Prep a neural stabilizer and get me a cortical mapping device. The medic didn't move. You can't possibly. Either help me or get out of the way, Ryland snapped. He couldn't waste time arguing. The medic huffed, directing a medbot to retrieve the requested tools. Ryland leaned over the Traxian, whose skin was now pulsing erratically. He could see the nervous system glowing, lines of light flickering through their body like a malfunctioning circuit board. Listen to me, Ryland murmured, though the Traxian was unconscious. You're not giving up on me, not after I brought you this far. The cortical mapping device was placed in his hands. Its alien design was both familiar and baffling. He pressed it against the patient's skull, watching as a web of neural pathways projected into the air. The structure looked like fractured crystal, with bursts of light signaling misfires. I need to isolate the central relay node, Ryland muttered, half to himself. He activated the stabilizer, a small device designed to deliver precise electrical impulses to the nervous system. If he could synchronize it with the neural relay, he might be able to stabilize the feedback loop. The medic hovered nearby, his skepticism palpable. You are manipulating a system you barely understand. If you sever the wrong pathway. I won't, Ryland interrupted, his focus unwavering. The stabilizer tip hovered over the patient's chest, aligning with the faint glow of the primary relay. With a deep breath, he activated it. A soft hum filled the room as the device pulsed, sending a wave of energy through the patient's body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the flickering began to smooth out. The glowing pathways brightened, their rhythms steadying like the tide receding after a storm. The monitors beeped steadily, the red alerts fading one by one. The medic's antenna drooped slightly, the closest thing to a Grease Salon sigh of relief. The feedback loop is stabilizing. Ryland didn't allow himself to celebrate yet. Keep monitoring the neural pathways. If there's even a hint of destabilization, call me. The medic nodded stiffly. I will. As Ryland finally left the triage bay, he felt a small surge of satisfaction. He had stabilized the patient again, but the victory felt fragile. This wasn't over. Over the next 2 days, Ryland barely left the triage bay. The Traxian's condition swung between precarious and cautiously stable. Each time a new complication arose, an electrolyte imbalance, a pulmonary shunt malfunction, or a cytokine storm, Ryland was there, improvising solutions that sometimes left even the medic speechless. Relentless, the medic remarked during one late-night shift, his voice tinged with reluctant admiration. Most species would have surrendered to nature's course by now. Ryland smirked, exhaustion etched into his features. Yeah, well, humans have a bad habit of fighting the inevitable. Sometimes it works out. But his bravado masked a growing unease. The Traxian's recovery was like balancing on a knife's edge. Every success felt temporary. Every improvement, a prelude to the next crisis. Ryland knew he couldn't keep this pace forever, and neither could the patient. The breakthrough came on the third night. Ryland was adjusting the scaffolding to accommodate new vascular growth when the Traxians stirred for the first time. It was barely noticeable, a faint twitch of a hand, but it stopped Ryland in his tracks. "They're waking up," he said, barely daring to believe it. The medic peered at the monitors. "Impossible. Their neurological activity is too diminished for consciousness." As if in defiance of the medic's skepticism, the patient's eyes fluttered open. Their gaze was unfocused, their breathing shallow, but they were awake. Ryland leaned over them, his voice soft. "You're safe. You've been through hell, but you're safe now." The Traxian blinked slowly, their lips parting to form faint, unintelligible sounds. Ryland felt a surge of relief mixed with caution. The road to recovery was still long, but this was a turning point. The medic observed the scene silently, his antennae twitching in what Ryland guessed was a mix of disbelief and reluctant respect. When the Traxian finally closed their eyes and drifted back into a healing sleep, the medic turned to Ryland. "You've done what no Grease Salon medic believed possible," he said. "Perhaps you are not as reckless as I thought." Ryland let out a tired laugh. "High praise, coming from you." But he wasn't thinking about the medic's words. His mind was already racing ahead, planning the next steps. For now, the Traxian was stable. For now, he could rest. The next morning, Ryland woke to the insistent buzz of the comm unit on his desk. His body protested as he pushed himself upright, his muscles stiff from the days of non-stop work. He hadn't intended to sleep, but exhaustion had finally claimed him. "Foster here," he said groggily. The medic's voice came through, clipped and urgent. "The patient is asking for you." That jolted him awake. "They're conscious, coherent enough to communicate, though weak. Your presence is requested immediately." Ryland swung his legs over the side of the bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "I'm on my way." By the time Ryland reached the triage bay, the atmosphere was markedly different. The medbots moved with quiet efficiency, and the tension in the air had noticeably diminished. When he entered the patient's room, he found the Traxian propped up slightly on the gurney, their translucent skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Their large reflective eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies and tracked him as he approached. "I'm Dr. Ryland Foster," he said gently, pulling up a stool beside the bed. "You've been through a lot, but you're safe now." The Traxian's lips moved, forming words in a language Ryland didn't recognize. A translation device embedded in the wall chirped, its synthetic voice rendering the alien speech into common. "You saved me." Ryland nodded. "Not just me. The Grease Salon team helped too." The Traxian's gaze flickered to the medic, who stood at a respectful distance. "They declared me lost, but you did not." Ryland glanced at the medic, whose antennae twitched uncomfortably. The Grease Salon medic met Ryland's gaze briefly, then looked away. "I don't give up on patients," Ryland said simply. "Not if there's even a sliver of hope." The Traxian's delicate features shifted into an expression that resembled gratitude. "My name is Alak," they said. "My people will honor this act. I owe you my life." Before Ryland could respond, the monitors chimed softly, signaling a stabilization of the Traxian's vitals. The medic stepped closer, his segmented fingers adjusting the holographic readouts. "Your recovery is progressing well," the medic said, his tone still professional, but with a hint of warmth. "It seems the humans' unorthodox methods were effective." Alak's eyes closed briefly, their breathing steady. Ryland rose from the stool, gesturing for the medic to follow him. Outside the triage bay, Ryland leaned against the wall, rubbing the back of his neck. "How long do you think it'll take before Alak is fully stable?" "Difficult to say," the medic replied. "Traxian physiology is unpredictable, but your interventions have given them a chance they wouldn't have had otherwise." Ryland studied the medic's expression. The usual air of detached superiority was gone, replaced by something that resembled humility. "I didn't do it alone," Ryland said. "You may not have agreed with my methods, but you backed me up when it counted." The medic's mandibles clicked softly, a gesture Ryland had come to interpret as contemplation. "You possess a peculiar kind of determination, human. It defies logic and protocol, yet it achieves results. I underestimated you." Ryland chuckled, though there was no malice in it. "You wouldn't be the first." The next few days passed in a blur of cautious optimism. Alak's condition continued to improve. their body gradually accepting the vascular scaffolding as their natural systems repaired themselves. Ryland oversaw the process closely, fine-tuning the treatments as needed. To Ryland's surprise, the medic worked alongside him without protest, offering insights into Traxian biology that proved invaluable. As Alak grew stronger, word of their recovery spread through the outpost. Other medics and staff stopped by to see the patient who had defied the odds. Their awe and curiosity were palpable. Ryland, for his part, tried to avoid the attention, preferring to focus on the work. One evening, as Ryland was reviewing Alak's latest scans, the medic approached him. "There's something you should know," the medic said. Ryland looked up. "What is it?" "Alak is not an ordinary Traxian," the medic said. "They are a diplomat, an esteemed member of their delegation. Their survival carries significant political implications." Ryland frowned. "You're telling me I've been treating a VIP this whole time?" "Yes," the medic said. "And while I am loath to admit it, your efforts may have averted a diplomatic crisis." The Traxian would not have taken their loss lightly. Ryland let out a low whistle, leaning back in his chair. "Well, that's good to know. No pressure or anything." The following day, Alak requested to speak with Ryland privately. When he entered their room, the Traxian was sitting upright, their skin glowing with a healthy luminescence. "You wish to see me?" Ryland asked. Alak inclined their head. "Yes. I wanted to thank you again. Not just for saving my life, but for doing so when others believed it was impossible." Ryland shrugged, a sheepish smile tugging at his lips. "It's what I do. I'm just glad you pulled through." Alak studied him for a moment, their gaze piercing yet kind. "You possess a resilience I have not encountered before among my people. We accept the inevitability of death when it is declared. But you reject it." "It's not about rejecting it," Ryland said, choosing his words carefully. "It's about fighting for what's possible, even when the odds are stacked against you. Sometimes that fight makes all the difference." Alak's expression softened. "Your words will stay with me, Dr. Foster. And so will your actions." As Ryland left the room, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. For all the exhaustion, all the moments of doubt, this was why he had become a doctor. Life, no matter how alien, was worth fighting for. And he would keep fighting, one impossible case at a time. A week after the incident, the triage bay returned to its usual rhythm. The cacophony of emergencies and minor medical complaints ebbed and flowed, but something had shifted. The grease salon medics moved with a subtle air of respect whenever Ryland entered the room. The medic in particular seemed less inclined to dismiss his unconventional methods outright. Ryland didn't dwell on it. There was always another patient, another crisis demanding his focus. Yet, as the days passed, he found himself checking in on Alak more often than strictly necessary. The Traxian diplomat's recovery was progressing steadily, but there was something about their presence that intrigued him. They exuded a quiet wisdom, their words often laced with thoughtful observations about the nature of life and resilience. On the 9th day, Alak requested a formal meeting in the station's common area. Ryland hesitated. He wasn't one for ceremonies, but the request carried weight. When he arrived, he found a small gathering of station personnel, including the medic and a few high-ranking officers from other species. Alak was seated at the center, their luminous skin casting a soft glow over the room. Ryland shifted uncomfortably. "What's all this about?" Alak gestured for him to step forward. "This is a moment that deserves acknowledgement." As Ryland approached, Alak rose to their full height. Though still slender and delicate compared to most species, they radiated a quiet strength. Their voice, when it came, was firm but warm. "You, Dr. Ryland Foster, saved my life under circumstances that would have led others to surrender. Your actions defied logic, yet they succeeded. For this, I owe you more than gratitude. I owe you a lesson." Ryland blinked. "A lesson?" Alak inclined their head. "Your determination reminded me of a truth I had forgotten. That even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is value in the attempt. This is not the way of my people. We value acceptance, harmony with the inevitable. But your refusal to yield has shown me that harmony can coexist with struggle." The room fell silent, the weight of Alak's words sinking in. Ryland shifted awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "I was just doing my job." "Perhaps," Alak said, their gaze steady. "But in doing so, you changed a life, mine. And perhaps through me, you will change others." They reached out, placing a delicate hand on Ryland's shoulder. Their touch was cool, their expression solemn. "You have my eternal gratitude, and the gratitude of my people. When I return to my homeworld, I will carry your story with me. Others must know what a human can achieve." The gathering murmured appreciatively, the diverse mix of species exchanging glances. The medic stepped forward, his mandibles clicking softly. "Dr. Foster," he said, "it appears your methods have not only saved a life, but also bridged a cultural divide. A rare accomplishment." Ryland smirked, his voice tinged with humor. "Don't go soft on me, I might start expecting compliments." The grease salon medic tilted his head, an unmistakable glint of amusement in his multifaceted eyes. "Do not let it go to your head, human." The weeks that followed were busy, as always. Ryland threw himself into his work, tackling each new case with the same dogged determination that had become his trademark. Alak, meanwhile, grew strong enough to leave the triage bay, spending their remaining days on the station meeting with diplomats and preparing for their journey home. On the day of their departure, Ryland found himself standing on the docking platform, watching as Alak's ship was prepared for launch. The diplomat approached him, their movements slow but deliberate. "I wanted to speak with you before I leave," Alak said. Ryland nodded. "I figured you might." They studied him for a moment, their gaze unreadable. "Do you know what the others say about your kind?" "I can guess," Ryland replied lightly. "Stubborn, reckless, unpredictable." "All true," Alak admitted, a faint smile playing at their lips. "But also extraordinary. Your people possess a resilience that is both baffling and inspiring. You see barriers not as limits, but as challenges to overcome. It is a quality that will serve you well in the wider galaxy." Ryland shrugged, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "It's just how we're wired, I guess. But I'm glad it worked out for you." Alak extended their hand, their delicate fingers shimmering in the station's artificial light. Ryland clasped it firmly, the gesture bridging the gulf between their vastly different worlds. "Farewell, Dr. Foster," Alak said. "May your determination continue to defy the odds." As they boarded their ship and the hatch closed behind them, Ryland stood on the platform, watching as the vessel lifted off and disappeared into the void. He felt a strange mix of pride and melancholy, knowing he might never see Alak again, but also knowing he had made a difference. He turned and walked back into the station, ready to face whatever impossible challenge came next. After all, he was a human doctor in a galaxy full of the unknown. And that, Ryland thought with a faint smile, was exactly where he belonged.